hi there, ho there, fancy listeners. Welcome to the Film Board from The Next Reel on rashpixel.fm. We spoil movies. And on this show, we're going to shatter your expectations about the new film from M. Night Shyamalan. First name Mr., movie name Glass.
Elijah's changed over the years. He's given up.
We keep him heavily sedated.
But there is a reason
For that. He's too smart for them.
You won't be lonely anymore. You have 2 new friends.
The 3 of you think you have extraordinary gifts, like something out of a comic book. I've developed an effective treatment for this disorder. The light will force a different identity to take over.
Por favor, señora.
I want my headphones back.
Step away from the controls now, little doctor.
Can't beat the beast!
So you're not going to shake my hand and let me walk out of here?
Good for you.
It's in the realm of Unbreakable and kind of like a sequel to Split and kind of like something different altogether. And I'm so excited to talk about it here on the Webby Waves with you. Let's start by introducing our hosts. And guys, today, after whatever clever nonsense you've prepared after your name, I want you to tell me what trait or hobby is so overdeveloped in you, so clearly masterful, that it borders on superhuman power. Like at one point, you thought you might be undeniably special beyond explanation about it. How about it, Steve Sarmento?
Hondo and away.
That's kind of like a superpower.
Superpower. Oh my gosh. Alphabetizing the books in my library. I don't know. I continually reorganize, and I guess it's the superpower of, no, that's just compulsion. It's not a superpower. I'm really good at, it can't be. Everybody can alphabetize just like I can. I'm just more efficient at it, I guess.
You're like John Cusack in Being John Malkovich when he's filing.
Yes, exactly.
We're gonna get into that. Is it compulsion or is it superhuman? I think that's good to talk about. What do you got, Tommy Handsome?
You guys, this is the collection of main characters. Let's see. I can sense about 8 minutes before I get a headache. Does that work? All right. I can just tell that a headache's right around the corner. And
do you treat it or do you just acknowledge it to the world?
I just call it a day. I go back to bed.
Okay. How about you, Andy Nelson? What's your superpower?
I have no idea, but I will say I can put on a pillowcase like nobody's business.
That's good.
So there you go. Super useful.
We need the pillow. We need more
the pillowcaser.
We need a pillowcase squad for that. My name is JJ, and my comically super ability is overthinking trivia questions and karaoke choices. So we make a nice, strange gang of thugs here today. If you like us here and what you hear here, then definitely go check out all the details about this show and the Next Reel's extended family of podcasts at thenextreel.com. There you should join our open and accepting group of film fanatics and let us know what your non sequitur superness might be. Seriously, come hang out. We're fun. I am super interested to see how you all feel about this film. Let's gather everyone's initial thoughts, starting with Andy.
I was excited that with Split, that all of a sudden, at the end of that, when you realize, oh, this is actually all of the same universe, and the fact that it was now going to become a trilogy really piqued my curiosity. I was a little hesitant going into this because I'd been hearing a lot of negative reviews and negative thoughts, and I was like, oh, sounds like Shyamalan kind of did it again. But in the end, I came out of it going, okay, it was sloppy, it wasn't perfect, it had plenty of issues, but I still ended up kind of enjoying it. And I think by the time I got to the end, I'm like, okay, I can see why people have problems, but I still had fun.
Cool. And I think we want to delve into what problems people are finding about it, too. And I think that based on Tommy's first mention, that maybe we'll hear some of what those specific problems are. Tommy, what did you think?
I really enjoyed it for a long time. And then this was new for me. I don't know if a movie has ever failed to stick the landing so hard, in my opinion, that it almost torched so much of the movie that had come before it. There's so much buildup. There's so much expectation put on the third act. And I thought it was, to use Andy's words, so sloppy, so chintzy looking, so poorly thought out, and so self-serious that it ended up really hurting the movie overall for me.
That's interesting. And I think people think that about Shyamalan, right? I mean, I think that's kind of a little bit of his MO. Would you agree about that?
Yeah, he's known as the twist ending guy, and I'm actually a big fan of his endings. I'm sort of an apologist for as far as those are concerned, but this one just got insane.
Well, I want to hear what's insanity and what's not for you as we go forward too. Steve, what were your takes on the movie?
I got on board the train and I rode that train and I got off the train and I enjoyed the trip that I was on. I think I walked in cautious of, the bad buzz that was out there, but I don't know. I really connect with his films, with Shyamalan, even the ones that people don't like. Okay, there's the one with the trees and all of that, and we can just set that aside. But most of his other films, I find a way, and I don't know if I just connect with a guy that's trying to really earnestly say something in his movies rather than focusing necessarily always on story. And so I'm along for the ride to say, there's a point to what he's telling me, and I'm going to ride along with him and get to the end and see if I agree with him or embrace this idea or concept that he's saying. So that's the way I always approach his films. What's his big idea? What's he trying to communicate? And I really enjoyed this one. I am interested to hear what your quibbles are and what issues you have, but I just sat back and went along for the ride and enjoyed it and knew it wasn't going to take me in expected places. And I always enjoy that. People have, in reviews I've been seeing, they talk about there were multiple, twists or things going on. I just set aside the twist stuff and say, I can't anticipate anything because I never know where he's going. I will enjoy him leading me along the path and see where we go together. And I, thoroughly enjoyed this one.
Well, that's kind of cool. And I think you bring up the idea about Shyamalan as a movie maker really looking to say something that's greater than or that is on top of the story. And I will say that for me in this movie, conceptually, the concept that he was trying to relate that was sort of brought to us through the story, I really, really liked. And I think that for me, I have a couple little quibbles and stuff too, and they definitely show up in that third act, which both Andy and Tommy talked about here. That statement that he was trying to make, the sort of overall concept that this story is telling, is really hits home with me in a very personal way. And so I ended up really, really liking this movie. Like it was something that was really special to me. And I made tons of apologies for all of that sloppiness. Because I was so along for the ride in the concept stage. So we can get into that a little bit too as we go forward. But I think we maybe want to save the quibbles for as we kind of get through the story here, because of the fact that most of it happens when we're trying to after the twist or as we twist into that third act. I'm not exactly sure how to talk about this movie because of the way this universe has been formed. Do we talk about this as a trilogy? I've seen it, mostly talking about it as a sequel to Split, but it's part of the Unbreakable universe. How did you guys see it forming up as a third movie? Is it a finale? What is it?
Shyamalan really, he said he's going to make it a trilogy. So I think it's absolutely fair to call it a trilogy. It just, I think it was hidden as a sequel with Split, that it was a sequel to Unbreakable. But absolutely, I think now he's made this, I guess he's just calling it the Unbreakable trilogy. I don't know if I've heard a name for it, but
it's the East Rail 177 trilogy.
Are you serious?
The train. Yes.
Wow, that rolls off the tongue.
That's what I've seen it referred to as well versus the Unbreakable, that it's the East Rail because of that is the common thread through each of the.
That's the train.
Was that in the second movie at all?
Train.
Yeah, it's the train.
Oh.
It's not in that's the thing, is it's not in the second movie, but we see how the events of that train connect in this third one to all three of the characters. So
it seems like it's a long jump or a long reach for us to all know what he's talking about, but I like it. I guess, a lot of the question comes up is that there's not really a finale to anything anymore, because especially with the way that this movie came to be, the first movie was in 2000, right? And we're seeing here this third part of the East Rail trilogy in 2019. is this an end, or are we going to do more? That definitely leaves the door open. And if they're looking to create more with this universe, there's definitely more ground to cover here.
Well, he certainly sets up a story that becomes bigger as you meet Sarah Paulson and her organization, and you realize that there's this group out there. So now certainly there's an opportunity to do more stories within it. I don't know. It's hard to gauge with Shyamalan, what he's up to. I feel like he could continue, but I also feel like this was kind of the way that he saw it going, and I don't know if he's planned on future stories. I feel like he could end it here, but if this ends up being a financial success and a big surprise like Split was, I mean, with Jason Blum behind it, who knows? The two of them could kind of pull something together and decide to kind of continue stories in this universe. I don't think it's necessary, but I don't see it as an impossible idea.
I agree with Andy on that. I think I would hope that it's done as far as films. We have so many other avenues for storytelling that I could see this easily becoming a Netflix series. However, to me, I think we've touched on this type of film. There's already a lot out there like this. It reminds me of things like going back in the early 2000s, like the TV show Heroes, where you've got ordinary people discovering they've got superpowers, and we've got Runaways on Hulu, and there's a lot that are already touching on this type of story. So I don't know how they would create this in a way that would find its own footing in, I think, an already crowded space. For me, it's a nice wraparound to the beginning. I don't know if you guys remember the marketing around Unbreakable back in 2000. There was a website that was called Are You Unbreakable? And what it was is they weren't touching on superheroes at all. It was just people in extreme situations exhibiting, unique survival ability to survive. And there was a little quiz you could take. And it was this whole idea of like somebody had created a website to collect stories of people that, this guy, lifted a car off his wife, and, this person survived this burning building. And it was this whole idea of, there's unique people out there. And, Glass sort of comes back around to that as we see that, after Philadelphia, Sarah Paulson's going to possibly go to these other cities where there are more and more people showing up with these unique abilities. I don't know that as I said, I don't know that there's enough, unique aspects to that unless it's going to focus on her organization to really give a series the opportunity to stand out.
Yeah, I think, you compare it to Heroes, I think, and I really liked the first season of Heroes. Everything that happened after that felt like it was rushed. And I think that, if we want to talk about what the difference might be in this really crowded market, and I think that's a really good point, Steve, is that Shyamalan has demonstrated that he has patience in what he's done with this movie. And potentially the patience and if we consider that the concept for Glass was originally a part of when they released Unbreakable, they were trying to do, which, with the website that you described, leads us to possibly believe that. It shows that that's something different about what this idea is and can be, and it can morph a little bit. At least that's how it feels, right? I mean, from 2000 to 2019, potentially if the thought was there, but then now you have a 19-year-old son of David Dunn, who was the same son that was in the original movie. So they couldn't have planned it that far in advance, right?
No, I mean, one of the things that I don't think we're forgetting, but I mean, M. Night Shyamalan was put into movie jail.
Right.
This isn't like this grand plan, I don't think. I think this is opportunistic timing. He clawed his way back with The Visit, and then he put this at the end of Split, which was great, and I loved that revelation. But I don't think that there's been this fantastic sort of overarching thing. And I think he lucked out that, Spencer Treat Clark is still like a really good actor and grew up right and everybody. So right. I think everything just sort of like fell into line once Split became a surprise hit.
I guess that's my point though, right? So he endured movie jail. He was fortunate that all of a sudden we have this sort of rise of comic book movies that now points directly to what he was hoping for this original concept with Unbreakable, all these positive things came up, but he still had this bank of ideas based on this original trilogy idea that he could draw from. And while it morphs with Joseph Dunn a little bit, he's fortunate that did you say Spencer Treat Clark? Is that his name? Spencer Treat Clark is all those things. It also works. And so I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that I think that he has exhibited patience in what he's doing with his ideas in a way that might give this legs, where something like Heroes, I don't know how you guys feel about Heroes, but once it got to the second season, I couldn't deal with it anymore because it jumped the shark in a way that made everything crazy for me. And it's because the first season was so good and everybody jumped on, so they wanted to do something exciting and crazy. I don't know. I'm really impressed with the way this trilogy wrapped up, and I like the movie, so that's kind of where I'm at with that. We talk about what we learned with Sarah Paulson when we finally get the big twist at the end that she's not what we think she is. I've seen people talk about that there's 3 major Shyamalan twists in Glass. That's one. That's a pretty clear one. Were there other twists that you guys noticed? Was there a particular twist that stuck out to you in this movie?
Another one was Mr. Glass releasing the footage, that the whole thing was sort of a play he was putting on in order to, because if people watch footage of superheroes, they become superheroes. I didn't quite understand how any of that worked, but yeah.
I think then the third one might be this backstory behind Clarence Wendell Crumb.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
The struggles I had with the film actually begin with Sarah Paulson and her character, and that's something that I mean, it was a nice twist. I actually enjoyed that it made my issues with her less so when the reveal happened as to who she was, but it still wasn't perfect. It still really made the whole beginning, the whole film really, once Dunn and Crumb are caught and they're put into the little facility, and then she came in, I just really struggled with that whole idea, because I had a hard time like believing, like, how does she know so much about these guys? Like, why does she know so much about these guys? There was no logic to this reality of what she was doing. And even later, I'm like, well, how did she ever figure out who David Dunn was? It never really made sense to me. And just the way that character was written, I really struggled with this angle. I thought it was a really interesting angle to take a group that is trying to kind of push any possible superheroes out of existence so as to avoid, kind of the Marvel world, I guess. You don't want to all of a sudden go into that. But I don't know. I just really struggled with that aspect of it. Even though I think there were a lot of elements that worked, but I think that was one of the things that I thought was just a little sloppy.
I completely agree with Andy. And it's one of those things that for me, on paper, looking at it from across the room, it's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. But what I was so distracted by so much in this movie is the sloppiness and how nothing really made sense or worked. The amount of funding that they have, the amount of information that they have, the fact that we've never heard anything about Clover Wrist. I think they're called the Clover Wrists. I don't know.
They are now.
The fact that they're housing superheroes, and they know they're housing superheroes, even though they're pretending not to. And yet there's one guard on duty at all times. Right. It was just there was too much to look past, and I couldn't keep meeting the movie more than halfway in order to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. And those things, I mean, the reality or the logic behind what they apply to the situation is difficult. I think the idea, it's difficult to reconcile is what I mean by that. I don't think it is reconcilable that there's one guard on duty, or that they put these ordinary humans who have no knowledge of the Clover Wrist people in charge of or tending to these superhumans. That the logic behind that, it doesn't work unless it's as part of the story, which is why that's here. I think
also, if you're gonna have a secret meeting, don't have it in a restaurant and wait for the civilians to leave. just rent out like a hotel ballroom or something.
Right.
Just very little quibble, but just a side note.
Well, that kind of stuff, and they do that for dramatic effect. I get that, but the other thing that I thought about them is like that they're like Templars, right? I mean, it's this secret society that's existed for so long to keep the balance of power in the universe. It's the Illuminati. It's this thing. It's this concept that's out in the world that people think about but don't have any that don't have any connection to right now. So I think that's what he's kind of playing to with this story. Again, your quibbles are totally appropriate. It didn't bother me nearly as much.
Yeah.
The quibbles that I kind of brought up that came up for me were when you get into the real sort of meta things about comic books and how they approach the story. Tommy, you mentioned this in your initial thoughts about, it's a gathering of the main characters. How did that stuff hit you? One time that I really disliked was when Glass's mom when they gather the three sub main characters to come and rescue them, they're in Paulson's office, and she conceptually figures out that, this is the super limited edition showdown.
So clunky.
Yeah.
Just to tell us in the audience that kind of stuff was bothersome. But again, it was Shyamalan really just trying to find ways to tell us his idea for his vehicle of the story. How did that comic book stuff hit you?
That was all pretty rough. It was, I appreciated that it was in there. I got his point that he was trying to make, but weirdly, I just felt like, there have been Shyamalan films that I felt like he's done a great job with the writing and stuff, but as I go back and revisit them, I find his dialogue with his characters can be just really on the nose, and really kind of one of the most frustrating points that I struggle through with them. I felt that definitely with some of the recent rewatches I've done. And right out of the gate, it was happening all over the place with this. I think that's interesting information to put out there, but I just felt like he wasn't doing it very well.
To me, it's consistent with what he did in Unbreakable, though. That's the way Elijah looks at the world. There's a scene in Unbreakable, I think, when David and his son are in Elijah's art gallery, and Elijah's mother is there, and she's talking about one of the pieces of artwork, and she's like, well, this is how I understand her. This is how Elijah talks about these things. So she's really familiar with that vocabulary of how he deconstructs comic books and the parallels that he sees in his life. So for me, it was very much in tune with her character from what we'd seen in Unbreakable. Elijah is if we perceive him as a delusional figure who thinks he's in a comic book, he's going to talk about ordinary events using this comic book terminology of, this is the showdown. That's how he talks about the world. So it made sense for me that that's how his mother would talk about things. So
I agree. And me bringing it up is not to say that I don't think she would say something like that. I just think that writing it into the dialogue to make sure she tells us as the audience what's happening felt really clunky and kind of inappropriate. It wasn't necessary. It felt like Shyamalan wasn't confident enough in us knowing what was happening that he needed to label it, and he needed a character to label it. So again, I think you're right. He picked the appropriate character to label it, but it wasn't necessary. There was a lot of that comic book meta stuff that wasn't necessary because, again, for me, I was already along for the ride. I didn't need those extra pieces of dialogue that just felt like, remember, we're doing a metaphor for comic books here.
Well, again, to me, it's consistent with, we didn't have the character of Elijah in Split, so we've sort of missed that. But, again, if you go back to watch Unbreakable, a lot of the conversations that David and Elijah have are those things. He's like, this is the point where now we shake hands. That's the big reveal at the end of Unbreakable, where we see that Elijah, and he talks to David about, his place in the world. And have you ever thought about these things this way? And Elijah always speaks in these terms. So I think it's because we didn't have that in Glass, we've got to jump over that because we haven't seen Elijah and his vernacular for talking about the world. So it was very meta back then in Unbreakable, but I think 19 years later, we have people that are more fluent in, the tropes of comic book movies. Back in 2000, we didn't have comic book movies or of this type. And what I really enjoy about what Shyamalan's doing with this is, and I think it's the appropriate timing, when you have, the Marvel Cinematic Universe going on, it's sort of the mainstream popular thing. And I think of, comic books in the 90s where you had, you still had Marvel and DC, but you had sort of the underground independent taking a different look at things. And to me, this is sort of the underground independent comic version of the superhero story. And they can, sort of speak about, and comment on the mainstream version of that because they're outside of that. And that's how I sort of, for lack of a better word, I'll say justify or accept what he's doing, because to me, I just see the consistency in his sort of running parallel to the mainstream comic book and commenting on that.
And I don't disagree with that. I think that that's a valid point, certainly. But I felt like in Unbreakable, the level of that type of conversation worked in context of the movie. In this one, I felt like it was way more. Like I felt like that type of conversation was happening all the time. They were always pointing out something to tie into comic books. And I feel like the world of our understanding of comic books has changed so much that now in 2019, where you have comic book movies coming out almost every month, I'm just like, do we need to have this much exposition about the world of comic books when I feel like our society's evolved to a place where we don't need it pointed out constantly? Because I think that it was not just Elijah, but like everybody was talking about it. The guy in the comic shop, the customer in the comic shop, like everybody is talking about it. And it hit a point for me where I'm like, oh my God, I don't need any more anyone else to point out to me how this connects to the world of comic books.
I think that's right. I mean, the extension of this is the thing that I think is really interesting when they use comic books and the comic book world as the maybe true reporting of specialness in the world, the kind of way that Men in Black did about tabloids, right? I actually liked that piece of it, to say that what we're doing in this sort of comic book trope is explaining away all of those things that, Steve, you mentioned from the Unbreakable website. We've created this sort of place where we can talk about what's superhuman about being human. And I think that was really great. It leads me to the place at the end where there seemed to be a lot of climaxes and denouements in the third act. But after one of the climaxes, we have Sarah Paulson reading up on comic books in a comic book store. And she hears kind of offhandedly a conversation talking about how the mastermind always has a plan. And as she's reading, we don't really know what she's doing. I guess she's maybe researching her next city that she goes to try to stamp out the superhero group or whatever. And she hears this, and that's where she discovers or really considers the fact that maybe Elijah had something else planned. I like that concept that comic books could be something that's a super real reporting of what's actually going on. But then I didn't need her scream for absolutely no reason when I had no drama about what was going on with her character in the hallway. But so that sort of thing. Did you feel like that was what was happening with this? Did you like that comic book sort of measure for real life? It's not fiction. It's somewhat super real news.
Well, that's something I have enjoyed about this series, is that it's not necessarily like, people flying through the sky bitten by radioactive spiders or anything like that, but it's just, there's something that's just heightened in you. And I think that's actually a really interesting aspect. And that's something that I really appreciate with what they've been doing here in these films. I honestly felt like, considering the film is called Glass, I feel like I would have liked even a little more of his plotting and planning. We certainly get some of it, but mostly it involves him sneaking out of his room and playing on the computers. So I didn't feel like I got enough of him and his side of, I felt like as the master villain, there could have been something interesting. I do appreciate that we didn't end up in the top of that tower like they were talking about. I'm like, oh, okay, this is the big thing. We're going to go there. I liked that they moved away from that, but I still was like, gosh, I really would have loved to see some great Glass masterminding. And sure, he does it with the end and the leaking the information and all that, but I wish there was more.
Yeah, it's tough to saddle, especially because it's called Glass. And because he wants to set up a surprise, he saddles his main villain with seeming catatonic for like 2/3 of the movie. Right. I mean, that's rough. I mean, there's a lot of, in order to make the reveals work, he had to make a lot of sacrifices that I think hurt the movie. That's one of them. Another one is, I know all I'm doing is harping on the third act, but to have that weird battle where no one really shows up and it's unclear, but to have
the police never come.
The police never really come.
Two police cars come. That's it.
Because that's how that works. And there's clover wrists and stuff. But also framing it during the day, seeing David Dunn in his outfit during the day, I thought was so poorly, but he needed it to be during the day because M. Night Shyamalan needed the reveal of this whole thing as a play to be able to put footage. So
sure,
it's tough. I mean, it's one of those things, one of the many things that seems like a good idea on paper, but actually in execution for me was just way too sloppy and hurt the overall movie.
That's when we're talking about Shyamalan and who he is as a movie maker. I think he has great ideas and sometimes they're executed well. And I think whether you like a Shyamalan movie because of its ideas or because of its execution might really give you a sense of whether you like what he does as a movie maker altogether. I think all of us, I think it might be interesting to go around. What is your favorite Shyamalan movie?
Mine would still be Sixth Sense. I think that is, I just rewatched that and Signs with my daughter, her first time watching those. I think that The Sixth Sense is still a really strong film and still really holds up, even if I do have some issues, more so now with some of the dialogue. But I just think it's such a smart film and so clever. Signs I always had loved, and this recent rewatch, it ended up hitting me more with a lot more of the issues that a lot of other people have. I found more issues with it, but I still enjoy that. But I mean, Sixth Sense is still, for me, his top.
And in both those cases, you liked the ideas and the execution, right?
Less so Signs this go around.
Sure. Mm-hmm. How about you, Tommy? What's yours?
Unbreakable.
Oh, see, that's
one of my things of maybe why I might be recovering from disappointment.
Oh, sure.
In this movie, and that's why I'm being a real bitch about it. Is just because I was really looking forward to this. I was really, really looking forward to this, and it when it didn't do what I wanted it to do, I get angry.
Sure. Steve, do you have a favorite Shyamalan movie?
Yeah, and it's ones that I think tie to parenting, and for me, Signs is right up is up there at the top, and then I think our family, it's our guilty pleasure is The Village, and I think there's so many things that about parenting and the stories that we tell to protect our kids that just so, to me, works on so many levels and is really powerful and really resonates with us. Because they're both about parenting, I think to a large extent, and that's something that's just really struck me at different points in my life with my kids. So
I think for me, it's Unbreakable as well. And I think that for me, I think the reason why I liked this movie so much is because the ideas, again, I have trouble with some of the execution as well, but the ideas that sort of wrap up this trilogy, whether or not it goes on or not, the ideas that are here are a lot different than I expected them to be. And again, they touch me in very personal ways, something that connects with kind of what you're talking about, Steve, in those parenting pieces. This is something that it's going to sound very cliche, but I really needed this movie right now. And it's like, wow, okay, I'll buy into that. So even with these kind of chintzy execution points, I'm taking all of it, and including some of the real flowery and potentially unnecessary language and dialogue that's there. I really liked it. So I think that's a good way to go.
And that's what I think is so interesting about this film, because I had all these issues with it. But I still, at the end of it, I'm like, I still kind of had fun with it. I didn't hate it. Like, I've had some films that we've talked about on this show before where I have these same issues and I'm like, it ruins the film for me. But this one's interesting.
Critics are hitting it so hard because of those issues.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I honestly haven't looked at many critics. I've only just kind of looked at the overall kind of the review, or just the kind of the main lines and stuff. But I think that it does feel a lot clunkier. And when you have something that's as sharp and clean as Split was, because Split was I think a good film even without it being part of this trilogy. I think that this one, it fell into, I think, a lot of traps of trying to find a way to shoehorn in wrapping everything up in all three films and trying to make a bigger statement about superheroes and comic book movies and the comic book world. And I think that it really seemed to, as he worked on it, it made it easier for a lot of his struggles with telling a good story to come through in a way that I don't think necessarily helped. But I think that would be my guess as to what people have as the main issue.
Well, you guys have talked about before, there's like a metric that we should use when we see the Rotten Tomatoes scores on things about what that means exactly. Right now, the numbers on Rotten Tomatoes sit at 35% for Rotten Tomatoes, which feels low to me. And then the audience score is 78%. So I feel like that is actually speaking to your experience, Andy, right? It's like, yes, I have these problems with it, but I also kind of like it.
Yeah, I think that is kind of that split there, if you will.
We will.
And I mean, but also to be fair, I mean, Pete's always bringing up the IMDb 6-star rule, and it's a 7.2. So I think, and that's usually fans who are putting that in there. So I think it is something that people may have issues with, but I mean, I saw it in a jam-packed theater, and and people really seemed to be getting into it. I mean, there were some like moments where I had a lot of audience reaction, and so I think that makes for a fun audience experience, I think. And even if there are going to be issues, this is one of those films that I wouldn't be surprised critics are going to hate it, but this is when audiences watch a movie and probably judge critics for being too picky. Like this type of movie.
And to its credit, I mean, I'm the biggest naysayer so far about this. I do want to see it again. Not in the theater necessarily, but so much of it was shot so beautifully. I love a lot of his, when he's not swinging for big effects. I think that's when M. Night Shyamalan is at his weakest. He doesn't seem to know how to handle effects. I think we talked about this at Split when what's his name started climbing the wall. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing in Sign when the first time you see Signs, when you first see the alien walk by and then they replay it again. He doesn't know when things should be hidden in the shadows. He's so good at just basic, like filming conversations and stuff. It's just so beautiful. Like every shot is like an event. And then when it comes to the big swing part, that's when he's not at his best. But I do want to see it again.
Well, the cinematographer on this is Mike Giolakis, is I think how you say his name. And I think he worked on Split as well, which I think is interesting. One of the things that you mentioned, how beautiful it's shot, I loved the framing throughout the movie. There was a lot of center justified framing on it that made for one of the things that I loved so much about Unbreakable is that they're constantly shooting through frames and glass and these kind of things panels that make it look like a comic. The first shot of this movie is, you have talks and all this stuff, but then you see, is it Patricia? It's one of James McAvoy's personalities peer through a hallway, through a small pane of glass as he's going to walk in and then see the girls. That kind of stuff I love. And they did that to great effect in this movie. And then there was the way that they filmed conversations was innovative and really cool in this movie. At one point you have Joseph Dunn across from Sarah Paulson, and they're having the conversation about his dad, about what did they call him? The overseer? What a weird name for a superhero. Regardless, so but they
it's not the weirdest.
It's better than Tippy Toe Man.
It's not the weirdest of superheroes.
It's not Tippy Toe Man.
You're right. You're right.
Who would ever called him the Tiptoe Man?
Yeah, exactly. What the heck is that? But so they have the standard 2 shots in coverage because they've got over the shoulders with them and everything. But then but for part of the conversation, you're focused on Sarah Paulson, and then the camera pans in the conversation going back and forth between the two speakers. And I love that stuff, especially for the mood of what was happening, the heaviness, the sort of, they're not really lies, but the fibs that his son is telling to try and get him out of superhero jail, and then all the heaviness of this conversation taught with this sort of panning back and forth. I mean, it was innovative and it kept me in the movie in an artful way. There were lots of shots that I thought were just really beautiful in the way that they made this movie work.
When they are first all imprisoned, I guess you could say, and she's doing her initial interviews with them, how the editing is cutting from one interview to the next so seamlessly, like where she's asking a question in a conversation with Dunn, but then all of a sudden it's Kevin Wendell Crumb answering, and then all of a sudden you're in that conversation. And that the way that the editing moved, it was so fluid and so perfect. I'm like, oh, this is when Shyamalan is at his best. Like that just got me so excited watching that.
Yep. And okay, so I mentioned that Giolakis was a cinematographer on Split. He also is in the upcoming Us Jordan Peele movie. He's the cinematographer for that. And what's listed, we've talked about this maybe transitioning to a TV thing. He has shot it looks like 5 episodes, 9 total episodes for an untitled M. Night Shyamalan project TV series. So that's pretty interesting to think about maybe what's happening here or whatever M. Night Shyamalan is doing. I'm excited to see more of this kind of work.
Do you guys notice the color? Because that's associated with each of the characters throughout. Because as soon as we get into sort of that Pepto-Bismol pink room with David in green and Kevin in yellow and Elijah in his purple, but if you pay attention to the end when we've got their, for lack of a better term, family members in the train station, and you've got David's son who's in his green from from his uniform for work or whatever. Elijah's mom is wearing purple, and then Casey is wearing a shirt, like a floral print that has a lot of yellow in it. And I thought it was really nice to see that visually thematic color palette weave its way through to the associations of their sort of partner characters, and as that carried out. What I am curious about seeing going back is if pink is going to be carries through, because I didn't see a lot of pink in here, so I didn't know why the use for that room color in that big interview panel with all 3 of them, if it's connected with Sarah Paulson's character.
Well, she was wearing pink in that outfit, in that room.
Yes.
Right, but does it carry throughout? Does she always have some pink with her? So I was looking to see how strongly it's associated with her, or if it's just that scene. Because I did notice she's got some pink. So that, to me, that's, as you've pointed out, Shyamalan makes he has great storytelling ability visually. Going back to the interview scenes as well, what really stood out to me is as Kevin, depending on which character or personality is taken over during that interview, there's a lot of times where he was allowed to walk out of frame as he's pacing back and forth. So our camera wasn't following him. It's fixed, locked down, and allowing your main character walk out of frame. I don't see that a lot in movies. And I thought that was an interesting choice. It brought me back to when he first gets into his room and he's eyeballing the camera to see where he can and can't be seen as he steps out of frame, and then, gives us all
Flicks
his
the bird.
little, what? Yep, exactly.
I loved all that stuff. Visually, I thought it was fantastic. And I think it's actually a good transition for us to start talking about performances. Top billed on this movie is James McAvoy with Kevin and Patricia and the Beast and Dennis and all these things. I don't know that there's any reason we could say that there's any flaw in what he did. He was stellar in this movie.
I said it when we watched Split that his performance was so good. I thought he easily should have gotten an Oscar nomination, because it's just so fascinating to watch him switch from character to character. I would say the same here. I think he was great. Maybe not so much when he's in a wire rig running across the lawn, but otherwise, I thought he was just fantastic in the part.
His neck veins make me nervous. They were a character unto themselves.
Yeah, I think I was a mild James McAvoy fan before these movies. I mean, I liked him, but I didn't understand. I wasn't a huge fan. Now I think I want to see anything he does, because anything could happen. I think this was such a great choice for him for his career, and I mean, for him to get top billing in this movie, he deserves it. He had the amount of heavy lifting he does as 24 different characters is just it's almost impossible to understand. He does such a great job. He's awesome. Yeah,
we saw, and I think we saw many more characters than we saw in Split, due to the lights or whatever that were going to cause him to cycle through. So because I don't recall the Spanish speaking personality, and there were a lot more in there. It was hard for me to keep track as well as I did in Split, because I think it's, is it Dennis that has the glasses in Split? So, we didn't have the different outfits, so sometimes it's a little bit harder for me to track when he would switch between Dennis and Kevin, or, the vocal distinction wasn't always as clear as between, when you've got Patricia and Hedwig and, the Beast. They're very strong, voices with those. But some of the others, it was hard for me to track necessarily because we didn't have all the costuming to go with it that represented those characters. But it was amazing to, again, see him transition, right there on camera quickly from one to the other, just effortlessly. Amazing.
You transition from that character that had to do a lot of huge swings to someone who needs to underact throughout the entire movie, Bruce Willis.
It was nice. It was nice having him come back as this character. I thought it was a nice natural stepping stone to go from where we were to where we are now and have him and his son running a security company. I just loved that. And having Spencer Treat Clark back as his son, it made for a great pairing. I really liked it. It was almost like the superhero and his boy wonder working together in their bat cave. I had such a great time
I like that.
watching the pairing with them. And I thought Bruce did a great job. I thought it was a nice continuation of the character.
I think he did it really well. There wasn't a whole lot of shifting or splitting that Bruce had to do in his role.
No.
No, and I'm trying to remember timeline. As I recall, I think the events of this movie take place, is it just 3 weeks after Split takes place?
Was it that?
That seems fast.
Because there was something about
it's like 16 years later, they say at some point, right?
No, between Split and Glass?
No.
Yeah.
From when they talk about when Elijah was put in the institution, they say that, or the train wreck, it was like, I thought they said it was 16 years ago, which would make, you're right.
But I'm talking between Split and Glass.
Right. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that it would have to be right after that film.
Right. Because I think when we're in the security office and Spencer Treat Clark is triangulating everything, I think he says, this is where, at the zoo 3 weeks ago, those girls escaped, and then now there's the new one. So I'm thinking about, in terms of, for David Dunn's character, he's been sort of off the, trying to figure out how long he's been doing his security piece. How long has he been doing this sort of like being the overseer piece? Because I'm trying to get a sense of, we know what's been going on with Kevin. We know Elijah's been in the hospital for, all 16 of these years, trying to track the trajectory of David's, character arc, because we know he lost his wife, 5 years ago or something like that? So is that when he started the security business and teamed up with son? That's the one piece I'm missing in sort of David's arc of, after the events of Unbreakable, what was his sort of path? We don't get a sense of, over 16 years, what's he been doing, because it seems like it's just recently the police have become focused on him. I can't imagine the police have been after the overseer for 16 years. So that's the one piece I wish I had a little bit more insight into, what David's been going through over this time and how he's been dealing with, this, his abilities, whether it got pushed aside completely. How did the death of his wife impact that? It's, again, Shyamalan's got so many, ends to tie up in here. I'm willing to let that one go. But as I look at these characters and where they're going, that's the one piece I feel like we didn't get enough of David done in this, of him as a person. And I think that's, Bruce Willis plays him understated. That's great. But I wish there was a little bit more to him, to his core, that we got to understand.
I agree. And I think looking at this as pulling this together as the finale for their stories as they all pass away, I think we would want to know more about it, but that doesn't seem to be the sort of choice that they were trying to go with conceptually with the film altogether. And then kind of sort of midway between Bruce Willis and all the crazy stuff that James McAvoy had to do, you've got Samuel Jackson playing a very interesting catatonic role through the 2/3 of the film. How did you feel about Sam Jackson's performance?
Troublesome. I mean, he's got some really great. Yeah, he's got some really great moments. He has to play catatonic, which is disappointing for most of the film. When he does come to life with the throat slit, that was electrifying.
Yeah,
loved it.
That was incredible. But then at the end, he's sitting in a parking lot screaming exposition to no one. And so it's just, he's sort of all over the place for me.
Well, and I don't fault him for that.
No, not at all.
I think he's fine in the role. I think it's a role that he's taken to really well. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that, again, as I said, it's called Glass. I really wanted it to be
about Glass.
Yeah, his big finale. And I just felt like by the time we hit that point, I was like, oh well.
Anya Taylor-Joy, that's Casey. I think coming out of Split, I really liked her. I thought she was very, very interesting. And I actually was happy with what she did here, too. I didn't expect her to take the emotional leaps that she did. And almost every scene where she was interacting with Kevin or any of the parts of the Horde, I was in it emotionally with them. And I kind of attribute that to her being able to deliver compassion. I was moved by her performance.
It was a very intriguing character, and I was kind of surprised that they ended up going this route, because I felt so much like it was this Stockholm syndrome sort of thing that she was dealing with. But I liked that it was something that she was dealing with. It was a little one of those clunky things. The fact that Dr. Staple would bring her in and let her do all of this interacting with this person. I was like, oh, I don't know about this.
Well, she was against it. She got
but she does it.
Somehow.
She does it, and that's why I'm like, okay,
right.
well, I'm not. This is purely for the sake of the story, and I wasn't buying it. But still, I agree with you. I think that she brings a lot to the story, and weirdly, I was surprised that when I saw her in the trailer, I'm like, oh, interesting that they're bringing her back, and I guess in the end, I thought it worked.
Yeah, her connection with Kevin, we don't get an opportunity because Split is so much about her escape, but in the aftermath of that, of discovering, Kevin was, subject to abuse, and that was so much of the flashbacks that we see in Split. And then we get a little bit of what has happened to her since then. She's now with this foster family and all of these things, so she's dealt with this, it has this strong connection to Kevin. It was something that I feel like, he's leveraging that gap, to create something that didn't exist in Split, to tease that out a little bit more because it's necessary for this one. But again, it worked for me when, she's finally able to get, in the end to get Kevin there for him to commit to being in the light, that, like life's, worth living instead of hiding from it. And then, we see that little red, sniper dot show up. It was a really powerful moment for me. And I think, Shyamalan was able to mold, Casey a little bit more into what he needed for this film. It's still keeping her true to where she was in Split, but to me, there's a stronger disconnect there again, where she's clearly gone through some things. We've got to have some dialogue and exposition to give us that I think may have affected some of the pacing. There's so many pieces to put together. That's one that I'll see on a second viewing how I feel about it, but it's the one that I have issues with a little bit.
I guess that's fair. One of my favorite lines in the movie was when Hedwig says, "What, you like Kevin now?" I don't know. I laughed out loud at that. We've talked a lot about Sarah Paulson already. I think her performance is interesting. I think because of her role, her identity is a major twist. I'm actually happy with both sides of that coin in this movie for her. I think she did right by what she was asked to do. That being said, the downplaying of the Dr. Staple through the early parts of the movie felt really small to me. I would have liked more to see more emotion from her, but I think it was appropriate for what the character was going to do in the movie. How did you guys feel about Sarah Paulson?
I like Sarah Paulson in general. I just feel like, again, it just goes to the struggles I had with this story structure in general, and how they framed it for her to be kind of this counselor. I had a hard time with her almost through the entire film.
There's a lot of explaining around her character. We've got to it fit very well within the comic book genre for me. As soon as she introduces hypno-lights, I'm like, okay, those don't exist as far as I know. That's a comic book device. And then, the fact that she's a specialist in these things, and there's some science-based fact that of, the MRIs and what that's going to reveal about their brains. I'm buying into that story. Of course, we, then learn that that's all just a ruse, that her whole mission is to convince these superheroes that they are ordinary people for the balance of power. And if they're just willing to accept their ordinary people and give these things up. So everything that she's spinning is all fiction. I bought into it because I know I have to accept this as grounded in reality as it is. This is a comic book story, so I'm going to have comic book, character like her that's going to be doing these things that I I'm willing to accept as, a trope within the genre of, who is she? Everything she says, I have to take as truth because that's the only reality that I'm given is she's, acquired this wing of this hospital for whatever reason. Lack of security or whatever. That's just, this is Philadelphia, this hospital. That's what they've got. That's what she's got to work with because it's not a huge government funded project. She's doing this because of her thesis that she's, studying these types of people. So I went with it. I didn't find it problematic. I just, accept what I'm given as the reality until I have a reason to question it, as we do at the end.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's where I sat on it too. We have those other supporting characters, Spencer Treat Clark as the son, and also Charlene Woodard as the mom of Glass. Anything important to say about that? I see Andy and I have been bantering back and forth about how terrible mom's makeup was through the movie.
It's just awful looking. I mean, it's tricky when you cast an actress who is actually younger than the actor playing her son.
Sure.
That automatically is going to make it more difficult. But then, from 2000 to now, 19 years later, the fact that it's weird. Like neither of them look like they've aged in those 19 years
at all.
But they still can't make her look old. And it was rough, man. It was just rough.
Bad
I mean,
news.
she's fine in the part, but it's just, I hated looking at her.
I even caught myself thinking a couple of times, maybe she's going to pull off the mask at some point. I mean, and I'm not kidding. Like I literally thought there was going to be some twist that she was something else. And I was like, oh man, that's just not do. It's just bad makeup.
Wow.
Yeah.
About Spencer Treat Clark real quick. I think I don't know if I've seen it that much, but using a deleted scene from an earlier movie in order to comment on the current movie as he does from Unbreakable to this movie is pretty ingenious.
I like
especially
it.
when
I like
we have all the same actors and stuff. I thought that was great. I bet a lot of people went, oh, it is the same kid.
I did.
Probably.
Yeah. I went and looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. It's like A Boy's Life, but done in the way that a trilogy would be done. It's great.
Yeah. I loved seeing him pop up in here. I thought it was a real treat. I thought he did a great job of bringing everything that he needed to the part.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It was a treat.
It was a Spencer treat.
All right. If we have nothing else to say about this film, I think maybe it's time we should rank it.
Flick John! Let's do it!
Check out the entire Film Board filmography ranked in one convenient place at flickchart.com/TNR Filmboard. When you get there, you can create a tournament-style stack ranking of your own and see how your big screen favorites run alongside ours. So where do we start? Andy?
First up, we have Glass or The Mummy.
Glass.
Oh,
Glass, definitely. Glass or Beirut. I will take Glass.
Glass.
Beirut.
Glass or Get Out. Get Out.
Yes.
Glass or The Martian. I'll take The Martian.
Glass.
Oh, The Martian with Matt Damon?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll take The Martian on that one. I'm a science nerd.
Okay, so Tommy and Andy do some Rochambeau action.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Rock.
Scissors. Paper. I did it.
Oh, Glass wins.
Glass wins. Glass or Split. Split, please.
Split, please.
Yes, Split.
That lands Glass at 14 out of 77 on our chart. Much higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah, I did it on my own chart and ended up high again. And I mentioned that it was a really good movie for me. I'm putting it in my Letterboxd rankings at a 4-star ranking. I was super, super happy with it, and definitely a like. Where do you guys sit on those?
This is Steve. I'm going to agree with you on 4 stars and a like.
Tommy says 2.5 and a like. Actually, cool. Because talking about it, I don't know. It's made me more excited to see it again because I'm remembering how much I really did love about it until for me, it all went to hell. So maybe if I just end it 20 minutes early, then I can be like, wee, 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I'm the same place you are, Tommy. 2.5 and a like.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't understand math, but that puts us in a pretty nice place with a like.
3.25.
Sounds good to me. Next month here on the Film Board, we are going to have some fun and do Happy Death Day to You. That was a trailer that I saw coming before Glass and made me really excited, even though it's kind of a scary movie, right? It just looks like fun. I'm excited to see it. We're doing it. It opens on February 13th, a Wednesday. And so we'll be doing the film board that week. Where is the main show right now, Andy? What series are you guys working on right now?
We just wrapped up our massive 1968 celebration of 50th anniversaries of films with Romeo and Juliet, and we're kicking off. We're getting into some pugilism, jumping into the Rocky franchise.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Gonna fly now. That's cool. Very good. Excited to see that. And also, can you talk a little bit new for 2019? We are doing the Marvel Movie Minute. Talk a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, we started a new show, Marvel Movie Minute. You can jump onto that, and we're going through the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. We are, we're 2 weeks into the show now, and so that means we're 10 minutes into the movie. So and that we're, of course, Iron Man is where we're starting with Jon Favreau's 2008 film. So it's a fun way to look at a movie. It's very it's a deep dive into all the nerdy details that come out of any given minute of a movie, and it's been a lot of fun. And can't wait to see where it's going to go from here.
When we have, I would assume we have a lot of Marvel fans that listen to the show. We've done a lot of Marvel shows here on the Film Board, and I think it's a really fun concept for the ways to look at what's actually being in those movies. So it's been a great show. I've enjoyed listening to it. And I don't think we talked about it earlier, but everyone listening to this show should also come join us over on Discord. You can get details about it at thenextreel.com. We gather with fun film folks about a half an hour before every Film Board show to chat a bit about what we get out of our monthly movie. There's a bunch of interesting bulletin board-like channels over there where we post stuff about all of our shows and other remarkable things all over the world of movies. So let's connect there and keep the conversation going. For this one, say goodnight, Andy Nelson.
See you later.
Talk to you soon, Tommy Handsome.
Goodbye, folks.
And one more word from Steve Sarmento.
Hundo.
That's the one at the next reel. When the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next.